Here in stage 2, applying shader materials, we're going to add some color to our 3D logo. Now in doing this, we're going to explore how we can apply materials and also how we can edit material attributes. So we're going to explore the Lambert material to begin with. We'll then take a look at how we can add texture to our material and have some nice control over getting a little bit more complex materials on our geometry. In doing this, it's going to teach us about a new menu within Maya, and that is the status line. In the status line, we're going to explore menu sets, what menu sets are and why we need to work with those. Once we're in our polygon menu set, we'll then take a look at normals and how normals can clean up artifacts on our geometry, and also UVs and how UVs help us control textures on our objects. In doing so, we'll also take a few test renders. We'll discuss what a render is, and we'll store a few images so that we can see the progression of adding materials to our logo over stage 2 of this project. So it was a lot of fun taking our grayscale materials, adding some color to those. So let's go ahead and get started. So whenever starting a new stage to our workflow, it's always important to create a new save iteration. So before I start, I'm going to go to File, Save Scene As, just like we ended in our last step, and here I'll call this iteration 02 3D logo, and I'll just do underscore materials. So that'll let me know that this was the material stage of my workflow. So now any edits that we make, we won't affect the original grayscale logo. So if we mess up on anything, it'll be very easy to jump back to this point of the project. Alright, so now let's give our logo some color. So what I'm thinking with my logo is breaking this into 3 different colors, having a white, red for the heart of course, and then for 3D, I'll give it a nice orange color to represent the 3D training colors. Alright, so that's what we'll do. So first let's start with the white. Now we can very easily create a material shader by right-clicking on an object. And when we right-click on an object, you'll see you get this pop-up menu, and there's a lot of different things we can do here. So let's not get confused by all the different options. We're just going to start with one single one, and that is assigning a new material. Now when I assign a new material, I get this pop-up box, and again, we have a lot of options for shaders. Maya is a very complete package tool. There's so many different options. We're going to focus on 2 types of shaders to create our 3D logo. That's all we'll need to create a professional logo. So we can use either a blend, and a blend will give us a shiny metallic looking surface, or we can use a Lambert, which will give us a nice dry looking material. Now I'm going to use a Lambert material so that we don't have any reflections or highlights on the logo, and then I'll use a blend on those bevels in the future to give a nice metallic finish along the edges. Now I would recommend trying this first, and then if you'd like to explore, try using different material shaders as well. But let's just start with a Lambert for our shader type. Now all a shader is really the material properties that make up the type of material on our object. So with shaders, we can create things like rubbers, plastics, metals, glasses. So the shader is kind of the hub that we can edit all the settings such as the color, transparency, or reflection attributes. So in this case, we'll start off by just working with the color. So you can see there's a lot of settings to our shader. And if ever you exit out and you need to find the Lambert shader again, the easiest way to do that is to select the object, right-click, and come down to Material Attributes. This will quickly direct you to the material attributes in the Attribute Editor. So make sure that if you're in your channel box that you do switch to the Attribute Editor so you can easily modify the shader attributes. Now to modify the color, I can use the slider wheel to change the value, but if I want some more color options, which I do, I can click on the color swatch and get the color palette, and here I have color wheels. Here I can type in the hue saturation value or the RGB. You can even use an eyedropper tool to click anywhere on the screen to take colors. So you have a lot of options for picking your color. Now with the eye, I am just going to use kind of a grayscale, more on the white side of my color chart. So now that we've got that color, it's also important that we set up our naming convention. So I'll just call this my white, and I'll underscore for material so that we'll easily be able to find this material in the future. So now let's assign our heart color material. So we'll repeat the procedure. We'll right click, assign new material. I'll use a Lambert, and I'll rename my Lambert as my heart underscore material, and I'll click on the color swatch to change this to a nice red color. I'll use a nice default red there. And then we'll come down to our 3D text, repeat, rinse and repeat. We'll use the Lambert once more, our color, and we'll select a nice orange color in my color palette wheel here. Want a nice vibrant orange. Represent 3D training. Very good. Okay, so there's a nice vibrant orange for myself. And then I'll just be sure to name this properly. So I'll call this my 3D material. And there you'll see it renamed it to D material for me. Maya doesn't like to start with numbers when naming objects, so that's fine. I'll call this my D material. Alright, so now I have the basic color scheme, and if I just maximize my perspective viewport, you can see that things look pretty good, but this isn't really the final quality that I may expect for my logo. Well, that's because we're just viewing our logo real time in a 3D environment. So things like lighting or any settings that we set with our material shader, such as reflectivity, is not going to be represented in our 3D viewport. Again, this is just a real-time render of what's taking place. When we start to work with lights and shadows, we're going to need to create what's called a render. And we could think of it as like taking a photograph and then having that image once it's processed. Now, to create a render, we just need to go up to our status line. And in the status line, we have these little clappers. And the main two that we'll take a look at right now is the first two. The first clapper opens our render view. And so this just opens up the rendering view without creating a new photograph or a new render. The second opens the render view, but it also renders the current frame. So since I have my perspective view selected, you can see that it actually took a snapshot and created a render. So this is actually the image. This is actually what the final deliverable looks like at this time. So just remember when we're working in 3D that our 3D environment is only a representation of our final view. We do need to create a render to process the calculations of lights, reflections, shadows to be able to see the final quality. Now, as we go through this process, we're going to create several different renders and see how this logo transforms as we add new elements. Now, something nice in Maya is we can use something called keep the image, and it's this little mountain icon here. And what this will do is store this image, so as we take future iterations, we'll be able to compare how that render looks to the past. Now, just to keep some continuity, what I'm going to do is come over to my panel toolbar, and I'm going to bookmark this camera view. What that means is if I move my camera, I'll easily be able to get back to this. So I'm going to hit this little bookmark icon on my panel toolbar. It's the third icon over. And now if I move my camera, if I want to get back to that view, I can go to the View panel menu. I can come down to Bookmarks, and there I have Camera View 1. So I'll go ahead and select that, and you can see that instantly moves my camera back to that same view. So that way we'll have some consistency when we take our renders to be able to make a comparison of how our logo is transforming. So that's our first step of applying materials and creating our render. So at this time, what you should do is create materials. Maybe you want to create one material for your logo, or maybe you'll have several different colors. So right-click on the object, assign a new material, assign either a Lambert or a blend material. Again, Lambert don't have reflections or highlights, and blends would be more metallic type materials. Assign that to your logo. Then right-click and go to the material attributes so you can edit the attributes such as the color or even the transparency there in the attribute editor. Then once you've set that up, create a test render, keep the image, and also bookmark your view. That way, as we're adjusting the material attributes and later creating lights, we'll be able to make a nice comparison to see if we're making our render look better and make sure that we're not making any settings that regress the quality of our render. So pause the video, create your materials and create a test render, and then we can resume to the next step.